Next, we're going to talk about angles, where, again, you should have kind of a intuition for what an angle is, even if you don't know exactly how we might describe it in this class. Here, when we look at angles, we can specifically call them something like the intersection or combination of two rays. But the easiest way to think about what an angle is to just, well, look at an example, look at what one looks like. So let's say we have one ray like this, where I'll label this point right there B, this point over here A, and as a result, I'll call this side BA. And there's technically a way that we can talk about the notation there. We could put something like a line above that BA to say that that's our side up there. And then let's make another ray off of B. And I'll say that this up here is C. So then we have our other side, which is another ray, and I'll call this one BC. Exactly what I call it, not super important. The persistence of this notation isn't something that I'm going to stick to you too heavily with, although I can't speak for Pearson offhand. Sometimes they're a little stickier than I want them to be. Anyway, for this, we can form the angle, looking at this combination of our two rays, by looking at the amount of rotation between them. That's what an angle represents, is the amount of turn there. We have a bunch of different ways we can think about what this is. Like, say, if you're walking down a hallway, you see a mirror that points you in that direction. You can see something coming in that direction, for example. That's the sort of thing you might think about with a angle. And we'll call the angle in there 1. There's no real good reason why we call that angle 1, but we can. And from there, we have a few different ways that we can notate this. We can call the angle either, excuse me, I'm careful about this notation, 1, or we can denote it specifically in terms of the vertex there. That's what that value, that's what that place B, that point is. We call it the vertex of the angle. So we can denote it in terms of what we called it, or in terms of the vertex, or if we want to, we can be very specific about what's going on with the rays that form it. So we can look at the angle and call it CBA, or if we want, we can call that ABC. There are a bunch of different ways we can talk about this sort of thing. Any of these works just fine for the type of thing we want, where then we can talk about the measure of this angle, and I'll show you what the notation for that looks like, where when we're looking at these things, we are looking at values in terms of degrees, where if you take this and you were going to pull it all the way around, you could think of that as forming a circle. So that tells you, maybe with a little bit of intuition, that the entire rotation would give us 360 degrees, and then we have some other special values inside of here, some other special relationships we can talk about with angles, where for these things we'll see a lot of examples with compasses and clocks and protractors for that matter. We have a whole bunch of ways that we can talk about what an angle is and what it represents. So let's do that then. Let's look at one basic example where here we're talking about the hands of a clock. So let's say the hour hand goes from 12 around to 3 o'clock. We want to think about how many degrees it will move through. So for this, we've got a picture up there for the type of thing that we're looking at. Hopefully you see that and you remember that that type of angle has a special name. We'll talk about that in a second. But what we can do is note that the hand went 3/12 or 1/4 of its total rotation. Remember, on a clock, those rotations are cut up into 12 pieces for each hour, or if you're talking about minutes, for every 5 minutes. So if we want to find the total number of degrees that it went along this path, we would just take 1/4, the amount of rotation it's done as a proportion, and multiply that by the total number of degrees it can possibly go. So remember, this symbol right there, that's the degree symbol. That's to say, that is our quantification of rotations. That's our little way we talk about that instead of, say, having centimeters or some other unit of length. That's our unit of rotation, is the degree. Where we can do that, we multiply it out, and we'll get a value of 90, which hopefully some of you remember is a special thing called a right angle, when you have a degree value of 90 for an angle, but we'll see a little bit more about that in the next video.